Beautiful, beautiful indeed. And now a man so nice, we're introducing him twice. Now here's Reverend Joel Fotinos.
Good morning. I love that song, by the way. Where did that come from? Oh, nice. Beautiful. That's a beautiful song. Is all this money up here for me? Yes. That's okay? All this money? Great. Thank you. Well, I feel prosperous and abundant. And I didn't even have to say, how many hundreds of dollars per word am I at right now? So, all right. So we're here to talk about living your passion, where I guess we're talking about passion and purpose all month. And my talk is living your passion. Oh my gosh, I have talked about this topic 100,000 times over the years. I really have. I've talked about it through every incarnation you can think of, through every program, through every book, through everything you can think of. And it's something I talk about a lot because it's something I love. It's something I like to live. And I've noticed over the years in teaching or talking or even in living about passion that we put this real heaviness towards it. Like we attach this huge thing to the word passion. So, people will come and they'll say, I don't know what my passion is. I would do anything if I only knew what it is. And then people will say, well, I actually have lots of passions, I just don't know which one to pursue. So I'm going to wait until something in me says to pursue one of them, and then I'll just keep going. And somebody said once that they were waiting, this was in a class years and years ago, and they said they were waiting for a great sign from life to tell them what their passion was going to be. And I remember saying this, I said, oh, you mean like in a Disney movie, right? Where the sky opens up and the birds fly down and they chirp on your shoulder, and the three fairy godmothers in Sleeping Beauty come with the beautiful shining robe that they carry and they put on top of you, and you are just now adorned with passion. But passion isn't that way. It can be. Some people really do know what their passion is pretty early on, but I have found, at least my experience is, that most people grow into it. They realize that passion is not a thing, and if they don't know it, then maybe they don't have it or something. It's not that. It's a process. Passion is a process. Living your passion is a process. One of the other things that comes up a lot in the classes are people will say, well, I would do anything if I knew what it was that would make me money. And we monetize things. And if it's not making us money, then somehow we feel like it doesn't have value. That's a real Western thing, by the way. And if you go to any group on passion, finding your passion or anything, or even groups on art, they will say, well, it's worthless unless I am making money from it. But what if we have that equation wrong? What if the question isn't, what can I do for passion that will make me money? What if the question really is, what will I do? What will I want to do? What would bring me joy that I would do even if I didn't make money from it? And usually that path, that thread, if you just keep pulling on that thread, it will lead you actually to making money from it. Not always, and it doesn't have to, but it can, and it often does. And I'll tell you some examples of that in a little bit. Now, on the spiritual path, because we're here on the spiritual path, when we talk about passion, the mystics of the world's religions would often tell us that our passion is not found through a thing that we do, but rather our passion is from knowing God. And going to our source, we might say in our philosophy, going to source or knowing our oneness, that is how we will discover passion, because passion comes from your source. So if you want to find passion, you don't look up there, you look in here and you go to source, and that's where you will find passion. And the mystics, will often take it another step further and say, if that's where you find your passion, then your purpose is to see that passion everywhere you look. It's easy for me to look at somebody like Ty and see that passion, that divine passion. But to go out in the world and see it is hard. That's the spiritual practice. That's what the mystics would always say, is it's our path to go out and find that passion, to see the divine everywhere. Now, if we bring that from the mystics to our philosophy, the science of mind philosophy, I'm going to get a little science of mindy here for a little bit. But in science of mind, and actually in New Thought in general, but I'll stick with science of mind for this talk, the first principle, the number one principle of the science of mind is oneness. That is, if you could boil things down, I mean, you could say a lot of things, but oneness is really, I would say, the primary, the foundational thought of New Thought. There's not two things, there's one. There's only one. Oneness. One thing. One mind. Oneness. And it doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it God. I remember my very first, one of my first Science of Mind teachers said that he would call God Sam because he didn't like God. And he said, Sam just makes so much more sense to me because I can talk to Sam and Sam will talk back to me. I actually lately have been using the word energy with a capital E, because when we think of God, sometimes there's that idea of God out there, when really I like to think of it as kind of a web of energy everywhere. And that's how we stay connected. In my mind, it's a visual, the web of energy. So when I'm here and I can reach someone there, how can I reach them through this creative divine process? How can I reach them? Oh, through the web. Got it. We're all connected. Makes sense to me. I like energy. You can use whatever you want. But oneness is the number one thing that we teach. And Ernest Holmes said that one operates through law, a creative law. In fact, he often would use the name as creative mind. How do I know this? His very first book is called Creative Mind. His very second book was called Creative Mind and Success. He got that from Thomas Troward, by the way, one of the architects of New Thought, who wrote a book called The Creative Process in the Individual. He even had a book called The Art of Life. The art, creativity, creative. And that idea is we connect with the divine through our thoughts, and I would say also our feelings. We connect through that, and by consciously connecting, thank you, Bird, by consciously connecting to that, what we are doing is we are creating, we are using the creative process individualized in each one of us. He even wrote a book called Creative Ideas. And this is a book of spiritual mind treatments, affirmative prayers. And he says this in the book. He says that this philosophy helps us to know that there's a power greater than we are and we can use it. For me, that's the web of energy. Then, as we affirm that we are one with the living spirit, and it is all there is and there is nothing else, our word, being the presence and the power and the activity of that spirit, is the law of good and cannot fail to operate. Just as we plant a seed and walk away from it, nature takes it up and the law of its own being evolves, so let us believe the same thing about our word. Our word is creative. Now, interesting thing about this book is it has a foreword by Julia Cameron. Julia Cameron, of course, is the great, I see the shadow of the bird's wings, by the way. Julia Cameron is known as the queen of change, and she is the queen of creativity. She wrote a book called The Artist's Way, which has sold millions and millions of copies and which I've been practicing for decades. I was reading a couple years ago, Pete Townsend of The Who. He wrote his autobiography, and I'm reading along. I mean, Pete Townsend of The Who is fantastic. I mean, I love The Who anyway. And I'm reading along, and he was talking about a certain time when he got kind of stuck in his life, and he says, oh, and then I got this book, The Artist's Way, and I used it, and I did the process, and it opened me back up. I'm like, wait a second, Pete Townsend uses The Artist's Way? This is so cool. We just finished a group. Some of us finished a group, Bill was in it, called It's Never Too Late to Begin Again, The Artist's Way at Midlife. And it's a whole process. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you this, oh, I should also mention, and I think you mentioned, we're starting a new Artist's Way group September 9th called The Artist's Way for Early Birds, 8 a.m. Saturday mornings. Sorry for that. And anyway, she says something in the book, The Artist's Way, her main book, and she talks, by the way, in this forward, that the Artist's Way is rooted in science of mind principles. That's pretty amazing. And she says this, she talks about the basic principles of creativity. And I'm getting his rhythm now, so I'm going to speak between the basic principles of creativity. And the first basic principle of creativity is this. Creativity is the natural order of life. Life is energy, pure creative energy. There we go, ba-dum, boom. That sounds just like right out of The Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, by the way, almost exactly. She goes on to say there's an underlying, indwelling creative force infusing all life, including ourselves. For me, that's the web of energy. When we open ourselves to our creativity, we open ourselves to the Creator's creativity within us and our lives. And she constantly refers, one of her names for the web of energy, or God, is the Great Creator. We ourselves are creations. And we in turn are meant to continue creativity by being creative ourselves. Creativity is life's gift to us, and using our creativity is our gift back to life. The refusal to be creative is self-will and is counter to our true nature. When we open ourselves to exploring our creativity, we actually open ourselves up to God or to life. As we open our creative channel to the great Creator, many gentle but powerful changes are to be expected. It is safe to open ourselves up to greater and greater creativity. Why? Because our creative dreams and yearnings come from a divine source. As we move toward our dreams, we move toward our own divinity. Yes. What would happen if you believed that and lived that every day? That creative dreams that we can take will actually lead us towards our creative and divine source, from which all passion and purpose flows. So, let me give you just a few examples of people who have done this, because we're talking about passion today, right? And so let me just give you a couple examples. There was a class, I've told some of these stories before, but they're my favorite stories about this. Years ago, when we were doing a class, and I talked about the fact that once you make a declaration towards something, life will come with you, just like Julia Cameron just said. And somebody raised their hand, and she said, well, I'm a jewelry maker. That's what I think my passion is. I'm not sure because I don't make any money from it. I said, oh, okay, so your passion is jewelry making. And she opened her purse. She had one of those big purses. And she pulled out, and she had jewelry in her purse that she had made. And she goes, I can't sell these things. So what good is my passion? And I said, I don't know. I can't answer that. But life can answer that. So if that's really your passion, let's see what happens. Let's declare from this moment forward that life is going to answer your question about this. And she said, okay. So class ended, she went downstairs, and she came up like 2 minutes later, and she said, oh, what good is this class? And I said, what's wrong? And she goes, I got one of those things on the wheel where they were going to tow the car or something, you know, I can't remember what they're called. A boot. And she said, now I have to pay money. So this is what you're saying that life is going to show me? And I said, I don't make the rules, and I'm not the one doing this. I'm not a puppeteer, okay? Just trust life. As Julie said, it's safe. She said, all right. You got 1 week, she said. She left, and she had to take the subway home. On the subway, she's sitting there, and somebody says her name, and she looks up, and it's an old friend of hers that she hasn't seen for a long time. And they start talking. And he says, you know, silly question, do you still make jewelry? And she said, why do you ask? And he said, I have to get something for my girlfriend, and I'm going to her house, and I haven't found anything for her, and I need to get something. Do you still, by any chance, sell jewelry? Maybe I could buy her something. And she said, yes, I do. He bought something from her on the sub ride home. What seemed like something really negative to her, that, well, nobody wants a boot on their car, but it turned out to be the answer to something for her. And she continued to make jewelry and make money from it, by the way. Story of two friends who kept saying, I don't know what our passion is. I don't know what our passion is. I don't know what my passion is. Well, what do you like? I like food. Well, why not become a chef? I don't want to be a chef. I like food. I like to eat it. I'm a foodie. These two people said, they both said that. So they started meeting up once a week to just go to different restaurants and be foodies. And they would order it, and eventually they would take pictures of the food. And this was a number of years ago, so blogs were bigger then than they are now in the age of social media. But they started posting the pictures of their foodie out, like foodie dates, and just posting them. And they said, we would go to this restaurant, and then they'd post it, and they'd have all these beautiful pictures, and they would talk about their experience. And that blog grew and grew and grew. And then they took trips together. They went to Paris at one point because they were such foodies. And they didn't even think about the audience growing. They just kept posting what they loved until one day a food company, or a food magazine it was, contacted them and said, we love your blog. Could we buy it and have you guys run it? Wow. They said yes, of course. Then there's the story of a guy on TikTok, a young woman on TikTok who said, I have no opportunities in life and I have nothing to do and I don't know what my passion is. The only thing, and I only know this because I watched all of her TikToks, the only thing I know to do is I like wearing makeup. So she started doing TikToks wearing makeup. And the whole TikTok would be her putting on makeup while she just talked about her life and which brands, and people would send her messages saying, what was that lipstick that you used, and what was that technique? Well, her TikTok grew and grew and grew to the point where it's now hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok, and makeup companies send her makeup to use to do makeup reveals right on her TikTok, and she makes all this money as part of the Creators Fund on TikTok. I remember well a woman who came to class and said, I don't know what my passion is, but I know what I want, which is to get married. I want a man. I want to find a man. And she read one of those books, you know, those How to Find a Man books. And one of the big tips in that book was to take a class that men would probably be in so that you're in doing something you like to do that men also like to do, and now you have something in common. So she thought, well, I've always wanted to do something artistic. So she took a class and she was looking at the different classes thinking which one would more men take, and she took one in sculpture. And she goes there, and the class was filled with women who had read the same book, by the way. And so she didn't find her man there, but what she found was she loved it. She loved sculpting. And sculpting turned into stained glass making for some, I don't know, the process of how that is. And then she ended up becoming a really, really popular stained glass artist. And she sells her stained glasses for lots of money. And finally, there's a famous story of a writer who had always thought maybe she might want to write, but she had never written before, and she was a single mother with kids, young kids. When did she have time to write? How could she do anything? She decided, well, you know what? I'm just going to do it anyway, because it's something I want to do. And so she would wake up an hour earlier, and for 1 hour she would write. And eventually she did it, and eventually she had a book, and she just kind of sent it in. Actually, maybe one of her friends sent it in, something like that. I can't remember the exact details. But somehow somebody sent it in to an agent, and the agent said, well, I think maybe I can sell this. And the agent sent it out, and it was snapped up for not very much money, but it took off, and it became a #1 bestseller and sold millions and millions of copies. Now, these are my favorite stories, some of my favorite stories. I have my own versions of this too. But what this means for us, for me, when we're talking about passion, is that none of these things were calculated. So many people think, well, what can I do to make millions of dollars? Versus these people who said, what can I do to be happy? What can I do, well, to find a man, but also, what can I do to be happy? What can I do that just is something that might interest me? Even a little bit, even just, I'm a foodie. That's very blurry until you actually start to do it. So none of this was calculated to make money. It was calculated, or rather it wasn't calculated. It wasn't head first, it was heart first. And one thing that is common for all these stories and many other stories I could tell you is that the first thing these people did, each one of them, is they took a step. They just took a step. They didn't say, I'm going to wait till tomorrow. They said, I'm going to take a step. Julia Cameron has in this book this great prayer, and she means it for writers. And the prayer goes like this. She says, every day, every single day, she sits down at her computer or with her, she often likes to write longhand too, and she says, God, I'll take care of the quantity. You take care of the quality. That's life as well. When we live in our passion, in a sense, that's what we're saying. We're saying, life, I will show up. I will show up. I will take a step today. You take care of the quality of what happens with this step. One of the formulas I live by, and I have lived by for decades, and it's really ruled my life, is energy follows action. When we wait for the energy to do something, oftentimes it never happens. I know of a published poet who wrote these poems because she loved to write them. She was so excited, and she actually got them published. And then after that, she thought, oh, okay, well, that freaked her out a little bit. I think that she had some success in that way. And she said, well, I'm going to wait now to write more poems till the mood hits me. Well, that was probably about 15 years ago, and she's not written another poem. Energy follows action. We actually have to show up to it. And we have to do it daily, consistently. We can't just do it slipshod because, as the saying goes, if you do it lukewarm, you will have lukewarm results. So and we need to do it daily. Take steps toward our passion every single day. What we will come to realize in this way is that the big steps of life are actually made up of many small steps of life. Selling a blog for a lot of money to a food magazine seems like a great outcome, but it was made up of a million little steps with no expectation of that. They took care of the quantity. Life took care of the quality. So how do we do it? In closing, we can talk about this all day, and we can do exercises and all that, but I'm just going to give you some very quick pointers of how you can live your passion starting today. The first one is change your self-talk, affirm. No longer say I would do something if I only knew what it was, because we know in the creative word of the creative process of each one of us that just means that we're keeping the answer at bay. We're literally keeping it away from us by saying, I would do anything if I only knew what it was, affirms that you don't know what it is. So instead, turn that around and say, I'm curious about everything. I'm going to pick something and go towards it. And then in that act of picking something, you are literally saying to the web of energy, I'm ready, I'm moving. And the web of energy answers back. So take a step. It could be take a class, take the Artist's Way for early birds. If you're not an early bird, take any of the other classes that are offered through this center. Take other classes, go online. You can literally take a class in anything, anywhere, at any time in this world today. That's an amazing accomplishment. So just pick something, anything, but do it. Don't put it off till tomorrow. Do it today. Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way, she has a tool in here where she calls artist dates. And that is that every week you take 1 or 2 hours and by yourself, not with a friend, not with anyone else, but by yourself, you go and do something fun. You can go to a museum, you can go to a movie. She likes, one of the examples she always uses is there's a big bunny at the pet store near her named George, and she likes to go and just they let her play with George for an hour. And she says that the reason artist dates are so effective is, she says, there's a phrase called the play of ideas. And she says that's actually a formula, it's a prescription. If you want more ideas of what to do, play. Go back and watch Neil's talk last week. He talked about this very same thing, the play of ideas. People are very resistant to playing because they don't see how it relates to a bigger picture. But it actually works. And then one other thing she has in here is to take walks frequently without friends, without dogs, without something in your ears. Just you and nature and walk. And just the mere fact of being conscious as you walk opens you up to inward propelling ideas. Now, those are just a few simple ways that you can begin living your passion, especially if you say you don't know what your passion is. Something in you does. Life does. But you taking a step is the way that you activate that. If you don't remember anything else than this in my talk today, remember this, that our passion and purpose is directly related to our creativity. Directly. So in closing, I'm going to read from this Ernest Holmes book, a little book called Practical Application of Science of Mind. It's an old book. It's not used very much anymore, but it's a wonderful book. And chapter 1, the very first page is called A Basis for the Creativity of Thought. And he says this. He says, our every thought is creative in our experience through the creative action of the law of mind upon it. So in changing our pattern of thought, we do not change the nature of the law, but we provide it with a new avenue of expression. Regardless of what our experience may have been, our new creative thought pattern is what counts now. We are not fighting anything. We are merely using our God-given right to choose the way we desire to think, and through the normal creative action of our thought, have it become manifest as our tangible experience. Your purpose is to live creatively. You can choose to live passionately through the creative expression, the creative process within you. And that is a process, and we can do it together. So let's close together with some affirmative words so that we can just connect to it. I always say, I don't want this to just be words. I want us to live this. So let's go to that place. We all know it. It's one breath deeper. And when we take that breath of release, we instantly go to that deeper place where there is that one dwelling, that one creative mind, as Ernest Holmes called it, that web of energy. That's when we become consciously aware of the oneness and that we are individualized in that creative mind, in the web of energy. We are part of everything, and everything is part of us. And from that place, we now know that today we will take a step. Today we will trust life. As Julia says, it is safe to trust life. And despite any outward appearance of anything looking differently, we trust that our steps take us to ever greater experiences of our passion and our purpose through our creative process of our spiritual life and through our creativity in our life. We take that step today so that we might live it more fully every day. And I know without hesitation that this becomes a great compass for us. Creativity is our compass toward the divine. And with that truth, I'm so grateful, and I release it to that creative law with excitement and with love. I release it now for each one of us. And together we say, and so it is.
So it is.